Hello everyone. Today's video is going to be the first in a new series that I'm going to be doing on my favorite trips ever. And I've decided when I compiled my list and went through them that the way that I think it'll be best to do it is I'm going to go from the most distant in the past forward to the most recent. And there's a couple of observations I made when I was reviewing my list of what I jotted down as my favorite trips. One is none of them are road trips. I certainly did not enjoy trips. Well, not saying that I didn't enjoy them at all, but they definitely were not among my favorites, were any trips that we made that were by car. So, note to you parents, kids don't like traveling by car. They really don't. And I've read that other places too, that the one thing when they ask kids what they want to do, there's two things that kids always say. I don't want to travel in the car, and I want a pool. So don't make your kids go on long road trips. They really don't like it. The second thing that I noticed was, well, this is a quick one. My last trip, our cruise on Mariner of the Seas, Royal Caribbean Mariner of the Seas, just in August, was not among my favorites. We've all really kind of felt sort of a lingering disappointment with that one. Not that there was anything really wrong with it. It just, we didn't love it. So that's been kind of we've all been just kind of a little sad about that because, oh, this lighting is terrible. Is that better? I'm having a terrible time getting good light today because it's a couple issues. It's late November. The light outside is just weird. It's kind of low in the sky, even though it's 10 o'clock in the morning right now. And so when I am at the window, it's actually in my eyes, and my eyes were watering, and it's not the brightest light. This does seem better, so sorry about that. Okay, what was I saying? No road trips. Our last one was not among my favorites. And the other thing I noticed was, with a couple of exceptions, although I would say on the ones that are exceptions, they are on my favorites list probably because I planned them, okay? There are no trips on my favorite trips ever list that involved traveling with my parents or my husband. And the reasons for that would be my husband, I just really didn't like doing anything with him. He was not a good husband. I did not like being married to him. So, and he was not a very considerate travel companion. He kind of always wanted to just do his own thing and really didn't care what we were doing. And one thing I remember when we went to London, he would, no, really any trip we took, and actually even here at home, he was always the last one ready. This is a guy. He was always the last one ready, and he would always keep the rest of us waiting. And that would just drive me nuts. Because so many vacations, especially at Disney, you need to get an early start, and we'd be excited and ready to go, and we want to go do stuff, and we would be stuck waiting for him. So that's kind of an example of what I mean by an inconsiderate travel companion. And then with my parents, I mean, it was okay, but the one thing I can say about my dad, besides that tendency he had, which I've spoken about in some of my other videos, to leave me alone all by myself all the time, was, well, another thing was that he often liked to travel by car, which I said I didn't like. And then another thing is I really did not like sharing a hotel room with my dad. And I vowed a number of years ago, I will never share a hotel room with my dad again. He's very annoying in the morning. He has habits and things that are just, yeah, I can't deal with sharing a hotel room with my father. So anyway, which brings me back to my favorites list. But those are some things I noticed about trips that you might think would have been on my favorites list, but weren't. And that's some of the reasons why. Okay, the first one I'm going to talk about, it was July of 1989, and it was when I went to Ireland on my homestay study abroad program. Now, I already talked about this a little bit in my Dublin video, which you can check out. I'll put a link. But I just kind of touched on it briefly because I was focusing more on that video of talking about the city of Dublin. But here's what I'm going to tell you about that trip and why that was so special and exciting for me. The first thing was, okay, I was 16 years old, almost 17. This was July and my birthday's in August. So I turned 17, shortly after I came back. So I was almost 17. As best as I can remember, this is the first time I ever traveled anywhere by myself, without my dad, really. And so, or my brother or whatever. And so that was very exciting for me. And not only was I traveling by myself, but I was flying to Europe, to across the ocean. And I had never done that before at all. And so that was very exciting to me. And I was going to be gone for a month, which was a big deal because this was a long time. So those things alone just made it very exciting and cool to me. I left from Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, and I remember then international departures and arrivals were still over at the other terminal, the Humphrey Terminal. Is that what it is? Yeah. Now that's different. Now it's like the smaller airlines like Frontier and Sun Country and stuff are over there. But for a while that was the international terminal where international arrivals and departures went through. Because I remember when we had our foreign exchange students from France, we had to pick them all up there. And I had to fly out of there. Wait, that doesn't make any sense though. Maybe not. I might not be remembering this right. Because my first flight wasn't an international flight. That's what I was going to tell you. I flew from Minneapolis to Newark. And I think there were 2 or 3 other people who were with the Nassau program flying on that same flight with me. But they weren't all going to Ireland. I think there were other student trips to other countries in Europe. And they were, they kind of had us all organized to be flying on the same day. And we didn't sit together on the plane or anything. I don't remember talking to anybody. And then when we got to Newark, a whole bunch of us had flown into New York from all over the United States. Or not Newark, sorry, LaGuardia. A whole bunch of us had flown into LaGuardia from all over the United States. And they kind of herded us all together. And then we had to take a bus from LaGuardia to JFK. And then when we got to JFK, we were sorted onto our international flights by where we were going. And so once I got on the flight from JFK to Dublin, I was with the chaperone. There was like 1 or 2 chaperone adults that went with us, and they stayed in their own home placements. And then all the kids, the American kids that were going to be on the program in Ireland, were on that flight. And so I got to meet some of them and talk to them. Here was kind of a weird thing though. When we landed in Dublin, they put us on a bus and they drove us to a church parking lot. And we, we're jet lagged. It's early in the morning. We've never been there before. We're all excited, nervous. And we sat on the bus, and our host mothers came to the bus, to the door of the bus. They had all driven to this church parking lot in their cars from home. And they went to the door and they told the chaperone person or whatever who they were. And then they called our names, and we had to get up and like collect our stuff and get off the bus and go off with this stranger. So it was really weird. It was kind of nerve-wracking as a teenage girl to like, okay, hi, I don't know you, but now I'm going to go live in your house for a month. So that was kind of funny. But my host mother, Mrs. Birmingham, was very, very nice. And as I said in my Dublin video, she hosted students all the time. Like I think she had 3 students every month of the summer. So June, July, and August for years. I don't even know how long she'd been doing this. And she did it long after I was there too. So, but she was very sweet and very kind and, took a great interest in us personally. Really tried to include us and make us like a member of the family. The one thing I will say is, in contrast to how we did it when we hosted students, their family didn't go out of their way to like do things with me, like take me anywhere or show me anything. They just lived their normal lives, and we were just kind of there. We just were kind of staying in the house. I think once I went to church with them, and I remember once going to the grocery store. And that was because I wanted to go with to the grocery store because I wanted to pick out, she was going to let me pick out some things that I liked. One of the things that they didn't have peanut butter. And I wanted like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for my lunch because she packed my lunch every day when I went to my classes. And she kept giving me these weird meat sandwiches that I didn't like. And so I asked her if we could get peanut butter, and she didn't really know what it was. And so I had to show her in the store. And then I was really annoyed because the Spanish girl who was staying in the house at the same time ate all my peanut butter. Another quirky thing, I had some trouble with food, was the first day at breakfast, not that first day that I got there, because by the time I got there, it was, the middle of the day. But the next morning, the first day I got up and I went into the kitchen for breakfast, she had like 5 kinds of cereal lined up there. And she said, okay, which kind of cereal do you want? And that particular day I chose Rice Krispies. I didn't realize that I was choosing to have Rice Krispies every morning for the entire month I was there. Because from then on, she didn't have anything set out. She just always had my bowl of Rice Krispies ready, and here's your bowl of Rice Krispies. So that was a little bit of a bummer. And then I had a little trouble because a lot of what they ate was meat and mutton, which is sheep, or fish with bones in it that I really didn't like. And so I kind of joke that I subsisted while I was in Ireland on potatoes because there was always plenty of kinds of potatoes. There was always all sorts of varieties of potatoes. And so I ate a lot of potatoes. And then the other thing that I ate was when I came home from school almost every day, there was kind of a little corner store like down the street and around the corner from my house between where I got off the bus and when I walked home. And I would stop in there almost every day and buy an ice cream sandwich. And I would sit like out in the little park thing and eat my ice cream sandwich before I went back home just because I wanted like a little treat. And we did have tea. We had tea time every day. I didn't drink tea. You didn't have to have tea. But tea is not necessarily, it's not necessarily have to be tea. It just means it's kind of like the afternoon snack, if you will. And she would always have scones and little baked goods and stuff. And so we'd have that too. And then supper would be later. So as I said in my Dublin video, I got my own room. My room was actually very nice. It was big and long and narrow because it had actually been the garage. And they had closed off the garage and renovated it and made it into this bedroom. And I think it might have been their oldest daughter's room before I came. She was gone. She was away. They had 5 kids and she didn't live there anymore. She was either at school or she had her own apartment or something. And it had its own bathroom, which was really nice. But I had to share that bathroom with the French girl and the Spanish girl who had one of the kids' bedrooms upstairs. They shared, but they would come down and use my bathroom. So that was the only thing with that. The other 4 kids were still in their own rooms, but 2 of them had to move to a different room, and they shared the family bathroom, I guess, with their, I don't know, did they only have 2? Not even sure. I didn't really go upstairs hardly at all, because since my room wasn't up there, when you came in the front door, my room was to the right, where the garage used to have been, and then the stairs went up straight in front of you, and then the living room was to the left, and then there was a hallway, and there was the dining room, and the kitchen was at the back of the house, and the kitchen was pretty sizable, and then there was a back door, and they had a yard, and my host mother grew rhubarb that summer. She had a bumping crop of rhubarb, and so we had a lot of rhubarb. Rhubarb crisp, rhubarb with our ice cream. We had jelly and ice cream. If you don't know what that is, that's actually Jell-O and ice cream, which was surprisingly good. That was apparently a big Irish thing. Something else that I thought was kind of quirky when I was living in Ireland, they love Australian TV. They watch a ton of Australian like soap operas and stuff, or at least they did then. So that was kind of funny. And yeah, I mean, I didn't really interact with the host family kids too much, mostly because I just wasn't there very much, because Monday through Friday, we left in the morning and we were gone at our classes at this high school that was closed, all day. And we didn't come back until the afternoon. our host mothers packed our lunch and we took our lunch and we ate it there. And then in the evening, I really tried to go do things. You know, like I'd come home for supper, but we would go into the city, you know, other people from my class and I, and or even me by myself. Another thing I remember is we were right on the coast. It was not a very far walk down this trail and this path to go down to it's the Irish Sea and the beach. And I liked to go down there a lot. I would walk down there and sit down there and write in my journal, and I just liked walking along the water and seeing the water and everything. That was really cool for me. So one thing that was notable while I was there is this was in the 80s, and the issues with Northern Ireland and the Irish Republican Army and Sinn Féin and all that was still a very hot topic. There was a lot of hostility and anger and disgruntled feelings about that. There was graffiti a lot of places about that. So that was something that was kind of interesting to me. And I was very curious. That made me very curious about what the British perspective was. And so that was interesting to me then that 4 years later I went and lived in London. So it was just kind of a different view to see both sides of things. And then, like I said, on the weekends, they took us a couple places. I think it was 2 or 3 of the weekends. They took us places. At the one time, we went all the way over to Connemara on the West Coast and stayed in a hotel. The other ones, I think they were just a Saturday. Like we went on day trips to on a Saturday for the day, and went not too far from Dublin and saw things. And I can't remember. I remember we went to a peat bog. I've got a picture somewhere of me jumping on the peat bog. We went to I can't think of the name of it. It's an old monastery with the tower. We went to a castle, things like that. They took us to different things like that. One night they had a dance for us near the end of our time in like it was almost like an old World War II USO dance hall place. And that was with all the French and Spanish students that were in our class too. And so it was just a really neat experience. I learned a lot about Ireland and their people and culture. And, we read poetry and books, and we learned how to jig, and we, did all sorts of things, lots of things it was very neat because our teachers were Irish. It was very neat to learn about Ireland from Irish people. And I know that other times in the evenings or on the weekends and stuff, I went to different places in Dublin by myself, and I went to museums and shopping and went down to Bray a few times, and so it was just a really rich, full, fun experience. I definitely packed in plenty of, I didn't just sit around and do nothing. I was home very little, really just to sleep and eat breakfast and supper. So I was out doing things almost the whole time. So it was a very positive, cool experience for me because I was 16 years old, like I said, never been away from home before, never gone anywhere without my dad. And here I was in this new country, learning all this stuff and exploring it by myself. I can tell you I never felt unsafe. I didn't. I always felt safe and perfectly fine and capable. I think it really taught me self-reliance and independence and the ability that, I can do this, travel by myself. And, I made new friends that I kept in touch with for a long time. We wrote to each other for a while. I think I've pretty much lost touch with everybody at this point, but I'm still Facebook friends with Erin. She lives in Florida now. She was from Pittsburgh, but she lives in Florida now. And it was just a really positive experience. I would encourage parents to not be afraid to let your kids do something like that. My oldest son, Andrew, has done, he did 4 trips without me in high school. He did the 2 music trips where the whole music department went somewhere. And then he went on the Flags for the Fallen trip to New York City, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Gettysburg, which was with a not as big of a group, but like a busload of people. And in all those, they were staying in hotels. And then he went to France with his French teacher. And I think on that trip, there was only like 10 people. And part of that was a homestay portion where he stayed with a French family. He lucked out. That French family's house was right on the beach. But anyway, That was actually his least favorite part of that trip, though, was the homestay program. He said during that part he got really homesick. But I think that part of the reason for that with him was because of the language barrier. He spoke French, and his French definitely improved dramatically from taking that trip. But when you can't say everything you want to be able to say with a family when they don't really speak English, that was a little isolating for him. And he was very happy to get back with the group after that. Like, they did stuff as a group together at the beginning, then they went with their homestays families for a week, and then they got back together and did more stuff together at the end. So and then he went on that J-term study abroad this last January, Morocco, Belgium, France, and that was like just super for him. And now he's leaving again in 40 days to go to Italy for a month on another J-term study abroad. So I have no hesitancy about sending my kids. I did have a little hesitancy, which is part of why we canceled for Megan going on that big Europe trip next year, just because she's pretty young. She's 14 now. She's only going to have just turned 15 when that trip is going to go, like days. And that was a long trip, 14, 15 days with a whole bunch of people that she doesn't know. So I can understand her reluctance about that. And I actually had some reservations about that too. So, she'll probably, I mean, she might do the France trip like her brother did or something like that. But I would like to take her to Europe myself before she goes by herself. I did take Andrew to Europe when he was 10. I think that might be on this list. I'll have to double check my list. But anyway, so my trip to Ireland in 1989, July of 1989, was a very good trip, and that is one of my favorite trips ever. And when I came back, I think I flew back to JFK, had to switch planes and fly back from LaGuardia to Minneapolis again, I think. And everybody kind of teased me a little bit because I came back with a little bit of an Irish accent. And then I still had, I had still a few weeks or whatever of my summer break, and then I went back for my senior year of high school. So it was a cool to have had that experience under my belt when I was finishing up high school. Kind of gave me a little boost of confidence. So that was the first one, and I will be back next week with another video about another one of my favorite trips ever. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for watching and listening, and safe travels, everyone.